When the Olympics first began, they were always held in Greece. They were always to honour Zeus, and they were always exclusively for men, who were almost always naked. I can't see the BBC televising that for lunchtime viewing. The ancient Olympic Games lasted for over 1,000 years, until shortly after the Romans invaded. But did Italy ban the Olympic Games and spoil the Greeks' fun, like so many scholars have surmised over the years? Or was there a different reason? Let's delve through the archives of history and find out. This is Refracted World. When we think of ancient Greece, we are reminded of their gods and myths. These have endured the passage of time and still live on in popular culture, thousands of years after they were first written. Zeus, Hercules, Poseidon and Hades are just some of the gods we still know the names of today. These stories have been retold in books, plays, films and on TV. There's currently a Netflix series called The Blood of Zeus, which I'm thoroughly enjoying. We can't even look at our ankles without being reminded of Achilles. But away from the fiction is actual history. The Parthenon still stands tall in Athens, albeit a shell of its former self. Greek philosophers are quoted in schools and hospitals, and stories of their grand events and celebrations have lived on throughout the ages. One of these events is still alive and well today, the Olympic Games. The ancient Greeks were very good at keeping records. It's why we know so much about them today. Well, apart from Sparta, where it seemed the people there were forbidden to keep records. But that's a different story for another time. The very first Olympic Games were held in 776 BCE. From that point on, they were held every 4 years, and so popular was the event that the 4 years between the games were known as the Olympiad. Unlike today though, they were always held in the same place, a specifically built arena in the city of Olympia. So you had the Olympics held in the Olympia every Olympiad. Yeah, they really did love these games. Like almost all ancient civilizations, Greek was a patriarchal society. Not that men were better than women at anything, they just presented themselves that way and therefore only men were allowed to participate. And unless they were unmarried, women couldn't even be in the audience. The men also competed while naked. Not in the beginning, but within the first few Olympiads, this does seem to have been the case. There is a popular legend from 720 BCE. A competitor known as Orsippus of Megara was running the stadium race when his loincloth fell off, leaving him completely naked. Still focused on reaching that finish line, he continued the race and actually won. From this point on, other athletes chose to compete without clothing, as they believed it gave them an advantage and the freedom of movement. The story of how it came to be is obviously an urban legend. It may be true, but it's more likely to be partially true. All we know for sure is that Orsippus of Megara did win the stadium race in 720 BCE, and on the next Olympiad, athletes competed without clothes. So, perhaps being naked was seen as more of an advantage. Maybe it was simply to prove that all the competitors were male, or it could have been a vain attempt for them to show off their chiseled bodies. As a man, I'm erring more on the side of the last one, only because I know how egotistical some men can be, especially gym bros. I can already imagine them staring up at the crowd and waving around their six-packs towards all the unmarried men and women in the crowd, screaming something like, "Yeah, baby, look how ripped I am," or something just as obnoxious. If we look at the social order of ancient Greeks, they were obsessed with the naked form. They considered it a representation of divine beauty and showcased it in many of their art forms. There is also the religious angle. The Olympic Games were in honor of Zeus, the king of gods, and the deity all ancient Greeks revered. By competing without clothes on, they could have seen this as a homage to their creator. Look how perfect you made me. And what were they competing for? Not gold, silver or bronze like today, but a wreath made of leaves and a hero's welcome in their hometown. It was probably seen as a status symbol. If you won an event, your name would be revered, It would be associated with your chosen sport and be tied to the Olympics, at least for the next 4 years. But you can't have a huge competition without competitors. In ancient Greece, the Olympics were primarily a pan-Hellenic event, meaning they were open to free male citizens from all over Greek city-states. These included Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, Argos and Megara. Athletes from Greek colonies such as Iona and Thrace were also allowed. The only stipulation was that they had to be male, they had to be Greek, and they had to be able to prove their Greek heritage. Non-Greeks, or barbarians as they were known, were not allowed to compete. And this didn't change for hundreds of years. Well, until the Romans came to town. To ensure the safety and continuation of the games, messengers were sent across Greece to announce a sacred truce. When the Olympics were being held, there was peace across the land. Zeus was so revered by the entire population that everyone honoured this decree. The Olympics were not just a sporting competition, but also a religious festival, and, as we all know, faith can be a strong motivator. The truce wasn't merely a way of keeping the events free of war, it was also a good way of making sure that you had the strongest competitors. The best athletes were likely to also be the best fighters. Diocles couldn't be spinning a discus in Olympia if he were still in Rhodes defending the Colossus, and so peace not only appeased Zeus, it also made sure the Olympics ran smoothly and had a competent group of competitors. It was even adhered to during the Peloponnesian War, when the Athenians were in conflict against the Spartans. For anyone who has seen the film 300, you may have a brief understanding of Spartan life, although this particular war came after the Battle of Thermopylae, which is depicted in the movie. I wonder if the Athenians shouted, "This is Athens!" Probably not. And this wasn't a brief rough and tumble. The Peloponnesian War raged on from 430 to 404 BCE, 27 years of conflict, or roughly 7 Olympiads. And yet, when it came to the games, everyone observed the truce. No war was waged in Olympia, and athletes were given safe passage to compete. This is how important the Olympics were to the nation, and just how much Zeus was respected and revered by everyone, even those with a sword to their throats. When we refer to the Olympic Games now, we think of all the many different sporting events. But for the first 13 Olympiads, the only recorded event was the Stade. This was a straight line sprint of just over 192 metres. It wasn't until 724 BCE that a second event was added, the two-stage race. From that point on, more events made their way into future games: long-distance running, pentathlon, wrestling, boxing, and the 4-chariot race in 380 BCE. Now remember, these men were competing whilst naked. And if the idea of wrestling or boxing can make some people wince, the idea of climbing up on a horse and racing on one whilst naked must take real willpower and strength. All of the surviving artwork from the ancient Greek Olympics depict different athletes competing in their chosen sport with their naked bodies on full show. As the Olympics grew, so did the selection of sporting events, but there were never more than 20 different events per Olympiad. Later editions include discus throwing, the long jump, javelin, and many, many more equestrian events. Let's just hope those men sired children before competing. The main event at the Olympics, though, was actually a sacrifice. This was a religious festival too, therefore the people must also appease their main god. On the third day of the games, they would kill and burn 100 oxen on the altar of Zeus. I bet that smelled lovely. These ancient Olympic Games continued for 1,169 years, which is approximately 292 Olympiads. Over the centuries, it grew into a cultural phenomenon, and whereas Greece had once been a domineering world power, there was an even bigger civilization bent on world conquest, one who was determined to cement themselves as world leaders: the Romans. The Battle of Corinth in 146 BCE is stated as the beginning of the Roman occupation of Greece. But it wasn't definitively established until Augustus defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra, taking control of the Egyptian city of Alexandria in 31 BCE. And by the beginning of the Common Era, Greece was under Roman control. With the rise of Christianity and Rome's claim for it to be the one and only religion, sacrifices were banned. Some have speculated that this was part of Rome's play to ban the Olympic Games, and yet they continued to be enjoyed by Romans and Greeks for many years to come. There may have been tensions of faith, and Rome may have been forcibly re-educating Greek pagans into Christians, but there is little evidence to suggest Italy banned or even wanted to ban the Olympic Games. What we do know is that after 1,000 years of use, Olympia was in a pretty bad state. Archaeological evidence shows that the site had fallen into disuse. One of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the statue of Zeus, had been removed from its temple and was taken to Constantinople, now modern-day Istanbul, and the workshop that built the Zeus was turned into a Christian church. But that was fine, as there was another temple holding the Olympian Zeus, which unfortunately was raided by barbarians, was never repaired, and eventually burned to the ground. The last recorded Olympic Games in ancient time was in 393 CE, and from the evidence archaeologists have been able to gather, rather than it being banned, it seems that the Olympic Games simply fizzled out and was left as a ruined memory of what once was. There is no doubt that the Roman conquest and the forced conversion to Christianity did play its part, but it doesn't seem to be the sole reason. The Olympic Games became the stuff of legend as the site and Olympiad slowly crumbled away. It would take another 1,503 years until the event was finally revived. In the summer of 1896, Athens hosted the very first modern Olympic Games. This time, barbarians were allowed to compete alongside Greeks. It is estimated that 14 countries from around Europe and one United States team travelled to the capital of Greece, sending a total of 241 athletes. Unfortunately, patriarchy managed to survive a lot longer than Olympiad, as all of the competitors were once again male, although this time they were at least clothed. Today, the Olympic Games are considered the world's foremost sports competition. There are more than 200 teams representing sovereign states and territories from all over the globe. The Olympic Games programme consists of 35 sports, 30 disciplines, and 408 events. Every 4 years, for 2.5 weeks, the best athletes in the world compete in their respective events to win a medal of either bronze, silver, or gold. This year, the Summer Olympics are being held in Paris, and a few weeks after is the start of the Paralympics. We also have the Winter Olympics, which is also held every 4 years, but since the 1980s, they are on a separate cycle. The Winter Olympics are now held 2 years after the Summer Olympics. Whether you compete, enjoy watching, or avoid the Games altogether, there is no denying its long, rich, and fascinating history. With its beginnings as a simple running event, to a manhood-destroying sausage fest, all the way to today, the Olympic Games brings together the entire world in competition and camaraderie. Will it last another 1,000 years? Only time will tell. When I worked in TV, I was the director and writer and was paid a salary. Now I'm performing every single role, buying all the equipment and software, and not getting paid at all. But I am committed to producing well-researched, professional, and engaging content, and all I ask in return is for you to please spend a few seconds liking, commenting on, and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. All of this really does help. Thank you. For anyone looking for merch, check out the link in the bio. There are always new designs landing on my Etsy store, when I have time to design them. Until next time, take care, Sapiens, and goodbye.